According to reports, Nelson Peltz is taking the lead, an early lead in the Disney Proxy war. So welcome back to Views with Hughes and Jennifer News. This is Jerome Hughes. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, click bell notifications so that way you'll be notified future uploads and updates. So apparently someone told Wall Street Journal, and this came from a report from them that, they've shared yesterday. Someone told the Wall Street Journal that Nelson Peltz is actually in the lead for a spot on the Woke Disney company's board. And yes, Nelson Peltz is actually winning. All right. So this is pretty interesting and everything. And a number of people may also have a few concerns about this, but to many of us, we don't have any concerns. We're just seems like we're being encouraged by this whole news, and most likely, we're going to see some different twists and turns from it. So just yesterday, the Wall Street Journal did drop a story about the big fight over who gets to call the shots at Woke Disney. Okay, saying things are heating up because Nelson Peltz is getting more people on his side. We've seen this with the ISS investment group, as well as the investment folks from Neuberger Berman. I'm not sure who they are, what they're from, and what they're dealing with. But meanwhile, Woke Disney's been pulling in support from some heavy hitters like George Lucas, allegedly, who made Star Wars, and Lorraine Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow. Even the former big boss of Woke Disney, Michael Eisner, and other big names like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase are backing Woke Disney. But let's be real, the battle is nowhere near done. Things could go any number of ways, and it wouldn't be shocking if there's a last minute deal before their big meeting on April 3rd. All right. But here's also one scoop. Someone spilled the beans to Wall Street Journal about the current vote count for the current Woke Disney company board. OK, and guess what? With only about 22% of the votes in, Nelson Peltz is beating Maria Elena Logomazino from Woke Disney, who's another candidate. Jay Rasulo isn't catching on much with the voters. And yeah, Nelson Peltz is leading the race right now. So this kind of info is actually getting pretty rare, okay? It's getting out there pretty rare, and Woke Disney is not happy about it. And they said sharing vote counts this early is really out of line because it can mess with the voting. And crazily enough, I'm sort of with Woke Disney on this because of the fact that leaking of vote info like this is not necessarily a good idea. But then again, who knows how this leak might change things, okay? And some might even see it as Nelson Peltz has a shot rallying more support for him, all right? Others who are big Disney fans and everything might have thought that Nelson Peltz didn't stand a chance. All right. But now is not the right time to rush to vote, thinking their vote is needed. Now, it's a bit of a tricky situation. So I'm going to go ahead and break this down into simpler terms, but with a bit more detail. So that way it's crystal clear. Here's the situation. You have these huge investment companies, right? And names you might have heard of, like, I don't know, BlackRock and Vanguard, the big heavy hitters to put out ESG and stuff. Vanguard, of course, stopped putting out ESG before, but BlackRock decided to stop doing that way long after. Okay. But anyway, these are the heavyweights when it comes to owning a big chunk of Woke Disney. Now, these players haven't made their move yet. They're known to wait until the very last second before they cast their votes on who's going to be on Woke Disney's boards. And we're talking more, maybe waiting all the way until the day before, okay, or even the morning of the vote itself, or the big meeting where all this gets decided. And yeah, they're doing all their voting through the internet, which is pretty standard these days, okay? Now, up to this point, only a small slice of all the Woke Disney shares out there, about 22%, has actually been voted on. And who's doing most of the early voting? It's not just the big institutions, it's the individual investors, okay? The regular folks and small investors. And here's an interesting bit. Nelson Peltz is the guy who's trying to get a seat at the table. We all know that, and is currently leading with the votes that have been counted. But despite his lead, it looks like the votes from these smaller players haven't really been swayed all by all the big names and heavy hitters that Bob Iger himself on the other side of interest and everything, on contrast has been pulling together to support woke Disney. All right. So as I have said, Bob Iger himself, he hasn't necessarily been doing a good job trying to go ahead and sway these other big name investors, quote unquote, and stuff to convince the smaller investors to go ahead and support woke Disney. All right. So what this means is that despite Nelson Peltz getting ahead with an early count, the game could change dramatically. All right. And or depending on how and when these big investment companies decide to vote. So far, the smaller guys who have already voted don't seem to be impressed by Bob Iger's big name endorsements and are throwing their weight behind Nelson Peltz. But the outcome is still up in the air because those big investment firms holding on to a ton of power with their shares haven't showed their cards yet. So when you add up what BlackRock and Vanguard have got in woke Disney, it's somewhere between 15% and 33%, give or take, depending on their, latest moves. I was just listening to other YouTubers, and I was also talking about this before, how big of a deal these giant advisory groups are, and firms like Glass Lewis are backing Bob Iger's team just the way it is. And then you have gotten even the bigger ISS or institutional shareholder services telling the big investment funds, they should throw their support behind Nelson Peltz instead of Mary Lamino. Okay. Now they didn't say much about Jay Rasulo though, and it looks like Nelson Peltz might actually pull off a win here, even without his main sidekick. Okay, but I could be wrong. You never know. But hold on. But just make sure you just wait and hold your horses before you automatically think the big investment firms like Vanguard and BlackRock are going to back Bob Iger's crew without even a second thought. Okay. Now let me break this down for you, because those advisory firms like ISS in particular are packing a big punch with these decisions. And they're also, looking at this situation, not just filling a spot on the board, but, also thinking that, they're also thinking that about what's best for the company. And quite a few people out there believe that Nelson Peltz could bring something positive to the table. Now, bring him on board won't shake up Bob Iger's role as CEO or even kick him off of Disney's board, despite the news or fake news that Nelson Peltz and Tryon decided not to support Bob Iger's pal Bob Hare for a board seat. And honestly, that might not be the worst thing ever. Okay. So you see, there's this idea floating around, thanks to Nelson Peltz stirring the pot, that maybe, just maybe, having Bob Iger focus on running Disney, woke Disney, without the distraction of board duties could be a smart move. Okay. And even though Bob Iger isn't the chairman of the board anymore, the title goes to Mark Parker. He's still got a heavy influence over the board's decision. And some folks are arguing that keeping Bob Iger off the board, especially while they're on a hunt for a successor, could actually clear the way for some fresh thinking and some new leadership. Some people even call it for some younger leadership, but we doubt that's going to happen. All right. So when you get down to it, not having Iger on the board during this transition might just be the best move for everyone involved. So guys, just because Nelson Peltz is ahead right now doesn't mean he's got it in the bag for the big woke Disney meeting on Wednesday. And Nelson Peltz being in the lead sure does help his chances to win big time. Now, more people are starting to support him, even if they're not big shots. And I seriously doubt we'll hear anything from the heavy hitters like Vanguard and BlackRock about where they stand until after they voted. Okay, so let's just wait and see. And if they wait until the last second to show their hand, it might not even make much of a difference to the outcome by then. Okay. And if you're curious about how Bob Iger was feeling about all this drama and stuff, especially just before today, here's the scoop. Bob Iger was just chatting with his colleagues before they shared how the company was doing financially back in February, telling them he thought the good news from woke Disney would totally knock out, Nelson Peltz and his group's challenge. And folks have been even talking to Bob Iger lately, say he seemed short of himself and pretty pleased with where the company was heading. He even mentioned to someone close that he's sure Woke Disney is going to come out on top. But given everything going on now, you've got to wonder if he's still feeling that sure. Chances are he might be sweating it a bit by now. All right. So I told you all several times before when I reported on this particular matter, every time Bob Iger makes a big announcement, news of Nelson Peltz doing something even bigger comes out. And it seems to me that with the fact that they're reporting this, even the Wall Street Journal, this is true. And even Bob Iger and Woke Disney admitted that this kind of news leaking out there could affect the vote and stuff. Yeah, that might be true, but guess what? It's giving Nelson Peltz even much bigger chance to win this. So people, hold on to your seats, grab the popcorn, and get your favorite drink, because this is about to get dicey and the big ending is coming. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you might have on this particular topic. If you enjoyed what I shared in this video, go ahead, smash the like button, and share far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already, you enjoyed all the content I put out there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification, so that way you be notified of future uploads and updates. Until then, peace.